All right, so welcome everyone to our Hacking 101 webinar. We're going to have a behind the scenes look at a cyber attack today. It's going to be pretty cool. So just before we get into our content, I am going to go over a couple of housekeeping items with everyone. So questions are obviously encouraged throughout the webinar. We'll have some Q&A at the end as well. If you look in the bottom right hand of your screen, there is a panel to submit any and all of your questions there. And we will have one live polling question towards the end of the webinar, so just keep an eye out for that. And you'll be able to just click your answers on the screen when that pops up. And finally, a recording of this presentation as well as the slide deck of the presentation will be sent to everyone who is attending today, as well as anyone that registered. So if you've got someone else in your company who registered and wasn't able to attend, you can let them know that they will be provided the recording and the slide deck as well. So my name is Maddie Regis. I am the Marketing Content Coordinator for NetGain Technologies. And with me today is Stephen Garrison. He's one of our security analysts here at NetGain. So I'm going to let him introduce himself.
Hey everybody, my name's Stephen. Thanks, Maddie. I'm a security analyst here at NetGain. I'm currently ranked in the 600s out of about 500,000 users worldwide. Actually, I think it's closer to 700,000 users worldwide now. I'm CompTIA Pentest Plus certified. It's one of the first people. I passed like version 1 of the exam back when it came out in 2018. And working on the OSCP certification, Offensive Security Certified Professional, is my next goal.
Nice. All right, thanks, Stephen. And the who am I is a command prompt in a line of code. So that's why we've got that up there as one word. I thought that was a fun little addition by Stephen.
Who am I is the command you can use to identify yourself in an operating system, both in Linux and Windows. So that's a typical way for presenters at hacker conferences to title their intro slide. So figured we'd carry on the tradition here.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks, Stephen. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today. So let's get into it. So we've got kind of a scenario for the demo today that Stephen's going to be doing. So we're going to just kind of give some background on that. So Stephen, why don't you go ahead and tell us about that?
Yeah. So what we're doing today is we're going to demo a privilege escalation attack. We're going to start inside the network with no access to any of the authenticated services inside the network. And basically, the scenario is we've got John Doe. John Doe works for Blackfield. It's a company. It doesn't really matter what they do. They have an external domain of blackfield.htb. They have an internal domain of blackfield.local. And we know John Doe has clicked on an email link, and we're able to proxy our web traffic or all of our traffic through his computer now. He's been compromised through a phishing attack because we knew he would be on PTO this week, because we've been monitoring his emails and chats. We chose this week to start pivoting through his computer to attack internal resources on the blackfield.local domain.
All right. So yeah, so just keep that in mind. If you were to ever accidentally click on a phishing link, this could be a potential scenario that could happen. And with that, we've got sort of a diagram of the attack of how the attacker would get in. So Stephen, why don't you give some of your cybersecurity insight on what's going on in this diagram?
Sure. This is a real simple diagram I just sort of threw together to show, we've got an attacker there who's pivoting through. He's pivoting around the firewall by having compromised a single account or a single user on the inside. And what we're doing is we're just using the network access to the Active Directory services in this specific example. So we're not using anything that we found on John Doe's computer. We're using just an IP address that we have reserved on the LAN side. So.
Nice. All right. And with that, we're going to actually get into the fun stuff with the hack in action. So let me pop over to Stephen's screen now, and he's going to show you how this would be done.
Got it. Let me see. All right. You see that?
Yep.
Awesome. Cool. So we are going to start by made sure that I had a connection to the Blackfield domain. So we ran a ping just to make sure we're getting a response from that domain controller. Typically, the next step in any sort of attack would be to start poking around and looking for services. So I've already run an in-map scan. Here's the full command if there are any technical folk on. It's nmap-pn-sc-sv bvv-p- yeah, a lot of stuff there. Basically what we're doing is we're running a port scan, a TCP and UDP port scan, looking for any sorts of services that we see. We don't know that this is a Windows environment until after we scan it. Typically this scan takes a little bit of time, maybe 2 or 3 minutes, and I just went ahead and ran it in advance. So we've got the port that the service is running on, the service itself, and then some descriptors there. So we do know that there's the domain. If we look a little bit further down here, we can see blackfield.local. Blackfield.local. We have LDAP services running, so we know that we can, whatever this device is, it's authenticating with Active Directory. It's checking in with Active Directory. It's pulling data from Active Directory. We've got 445, which is typically Windows file sharing. We also have an interesting one here with 88, which is Kerberos. Kerberos is an authentication service that you can use to tie in other services that might not necessarily, it's sort of it's a general purpose. It's like the generic brand of an authentication protocol, but you can use Active Directory as the back end. So people could use the same username and password to maybe sign into a website or a different service that's running inside the network there. And Kerberos is going to be sort of the delivery for that. Kerberos is also, if it's not set up properly, or if you set, easy sort of shortcuts on setting up accounts, service accounts with Kerberos, you'll often find that it's creating a weakness in your security infrastructure. And that's actually what we're going to look at today in this example. So if I were an attacker, though, I wouldn't go after Kerberos first. I see that there's a file share open. So what we'll do is we'll try to connect to that file share. So just going to run do all this through the terminal. So we're going to run SMB client. That's the tool that we use to connect to Windows SMB, their file sharing protocol. We're going to run this at local. Okay, it didn't ask me for a password. Typically, we would just look for shares from here, and we're getting access denied. And that's because signing is enabled in this specific instance. SMB is up to date, so there's no vulnerability in SMB. But as an attacker, I know typically sometimes people won't disable the guest account for Active Directory, and it might have access to a file share by default, or if they didn't set the permissions properly. It's asking me for a password now. Let's try just nothing. Okay, looks like we have the ability to, there we go. So now we've got, we can at least see several different file shares out there on the network. So we can see the local admin shares on the domain controller. We can see a forensic share. This is actually going to be our target for the day. We can see some other service-based stuff here, sysvol, profiles, netlogon, IPC. I'm just going to go through these and see if I can get into any of them. So we'll say use. No. Access denied. This would be pretty anticlimactic if I said that was the goal and I got in right away.
But you've still been able to get pretty good access to what's on the whole Blackfield domain just by a user clicking a phishing link. So you're already, I feel like you're already pretty far in there.
Okay, so we got a hit with profiles. Let's see what's in profiles. Looks like a lot of user profiles. So this is helpful information for an attacker. Getting to this, a lot of systems administrators might think, well, what can you do with all of that? Well, you've got a bunch of usernames. That's one half of your credential if you're in an Active Directory environment. Figuring out which user to attack is the first step. So we'll take this big long list here, and we'll go into the notes folder. Paste that in, and we're going to get rid of all the extra stuff there that's describing the folders that they're actually so all those are actually folders, basically, like in a file browser named after each user. And that's going to hold, data about certain GPOs that are applied to their accounts. It's going to hold data about anything that they would need to gain access to on the network, not on their actual workstation. If they were using, a conference room PC or something like that, they could throw it up on a profile. So we're gonna push that through. I'm just gonna do a quick cut of this here. Cool, so just the usernames, and we'll call this users.txt. So now we have just a clear list of usernames. And from here, I could go and try to use this and maybe use a default password list and maybe password spray. I could attack a user every 20 or 30 minutes, just try a common password, see if I get a hit. Until John Doe gets back from vacation, I've got all the time in the world to do that. But a quick thing that I can do to test, maybe before that sometimes causes a little bit of noise, sometimes doesn't. It's all going to depend on whether Blackfield has an internal managed detection system or a SIM or anything like that. Any sort of security detection we'll try Kerberoasting. So Kerberoasting is taking a user who might have, for whatever reason, pre-authentication set in Kerberos and attempting to grab a password hash for that user. Basically, what we're doing is we're trying to trick the Kerberos server into sending us a copy of the user's password encrypted, and then we could try to break that encryption. So an encrypted password doesn't get you anywhere, usually. There were some old methods of taking the encrypted password and using that to send it around the network, and sometimes that works now, and sometimes it doesn't. Legacy systems, you might find that it works, but we'll try this method. It's a pretty common one to see in an Active Directory environment. So from here, we will
And so with getting this encrypted password, is that partially because the user would save that password? So if you check like remember me on a box, is it kind of like a similar concept to that, where it just remembers it for different logons in different places?
Less so for it being stored on maybe the user's machine. This is actually the password database that we're communicating with. So Kerberos, what it does is it grants sort of session-based access. So you log into something and until you disconnect from whatever that app is, you stay logged in. Or if you go idle for a certain amount of time, it logs you out. So after a certain number of minutes of you being active on that device, it checks back in with the server and says, hey, or the server checks back in rather with the user's machine and says, hey, has John Doe been using this network device or this PC? If so, here's a new copy of a token or a ticket. In Kerberos, they use tickets. But it's very similar to like how cookies work in a browser.
Okay.
It is sort of a cached stored thing that you would store on the machine, but you have to communicate between 3 different devices in this case. It gets a little complicated, but if there's questions at the end, we can talk about that.
Yeah, but basically it's how you're getting in now is because it's stored somewhere else, so you're able to
Right.
we're
tricking the Kerberos server into sending us a copy of this password, or we're going to try to trick a Kerberos server into sending us a copy of one of these passwords in this giant list. So all right, so we're getting a lot of principal unknown, client not found in database, session error. What we're checking for, these users might actually have credentials in the database, but what this is saying is they don't have this sort of checkbox set that maybe a systems administrator would set, so that they don't have to type in their password 1,000 times a day to sign into the same thing. That's typically where you would see this sort of attack used. And if you look, we've got a long list of users here, and then finally we get right here in the list, and we see a break and this big long string of letters and numbers and some other text. So we'll take this and we'll put it in our notes file. Let's just do it this way. Since this is a virtual machine that I'm working in here, I'm going to pull up my local machine PowerShell prompt here, and what we'll do is we'll try to crack this. So we can see if we look at that hash, we see KRB 5 ASREP 23 support at blackfield.local. So the support in this case is the username. Excuse me. Support is the username. This is the type of hash that's been set, the type of hash that's being used in this case to send it across the network. So it's a Kerberos 5 is the version number, and they call this an AS rep hash or an AS response hash. Basically, this is the user would have to type in the password to get this, and then the user's computer could send this on to whatever website or service they were trying to sign into, and it would check out from there. But we'll go ahead and try to break this. So, all right, can we see that PowerShell prompt okay?
Yes.
Awesome. And we'll drop these nice and big for everybody to see. We're going to go into a hashes folder here I have set, make a new text file, call this hash.txt. We'll drop that big long string of letters and numbers in there, make sure there's no blank spaces, make sure we copied the whole thing, which it looks like we didn't. Try that one more time. There we go. And we'll save that, close it. And then we're going to run hashcat. Hashcat is a password cracking tool that's used it uses a GPU instead of the CPU of a computer. And since I have a computer that has a pretty hefty GPU, this will make it run much faster. We're going to be using a dictionary attack today. So we're taking a list of previously leaked passwords, and we're going to try and encrypt them the same way and see if they match.
And is that something pretty typical? Do hackers just have like lists and lists of leaked passwords to compare against?
Some of them do. There are some good guys out there who will collect them, and they run like services. For example, I think people might have heard of Have I Been Pwned.com. It's a website where you can go type in your email address and see if it comes up in a list of broken email addresses. There's also a password option there on their website. It's probably the only place on the internet I would tell you to test your password by typing it into a box that says put your password here. And that's because it does actually encrypt it in your browser before it sends it to the database to check and see if it exists. And that's probably the safest method for running a data service like that. But also people who do penetration testing, I mean, there's collections online of known used bad passwords. So if the sysadmin in this case was lazy enough to check the box so that he didn't have to sign in, his password's probably not very strong anyway. We're hoping. It might just meet the requirements and that's it. I'm going to see if I can, yeah, there we go. We'll need that number. And so A0 in this case is a dictionary attack. We're going to run this against a hash type of 18200. Run this against hashes, hash.txt, and we're going to use word list. This is a common password list that people use. It's called RockU. This came out in, I think, the early 2000s because of a bad Facebook plugin or a bad MySpace plugin that got hacked, and everybody's passwords were being stored in plain text. So you know how we got this password and it was encrypted? Back in the day, some people didn't think that was necessary, and they would just store the password as is. And if you could get to the database and get logged in, now you've got access to everybody's password without having to do this process.
Right. It's even easier.
Yeah. Hold on. What's going on? No hash is loaded. All right, let's try this one more time. Drop that. Give me just a second here.
And I know you've told me in the past, I'll let you do your thing here, but just for the audience, you talked about having a password cracking tool, and you might think, that's really expensive, or that, simple individual hackers couldn't have something like that, but there's actually a lot of options out there that are pretty easy to get access to.
Yeah, this tool is absolutely 100% free. You can download the Windows binary from their website. All right, so we ran it. It ran finally. We got, so let's see here. So it's running it through my GeForce GTX 1080, which is a graphics card. We finally got a directory hit, or a cache hit. We're seeing, okay, it was cracked. And here's the hash. And then after that little colon there, this would be the password. So it's #00 Black Knight be this user's password. So we'll take that and we'll go back into our hacking machine here. We'll maybe make a note for credentials. And this was for the account support. And we'll separate it the same way, just so we have a note of that. So now we have access to an authenticated Active Directory account, right? Or at least we think we do. There's another really cool tool that attackers use nowadays called BloodHound. It's not a command line tool. I guess it starts as a command line tool. You have to collect some data, but it really helps you visualize the next step of this attack. So we're gonna go back into our recon folder, make a directory for BloodHound, and then make sure I get the syntax right here. Use the password. I have to tell it where the domain name server is. In this case, it is the same as the domain controller. And we're going to look just for stuff on the DC. Oh, maybe. All right, let's try that one more time. There we go. Typed something wrong the first time. All right, so we got it. We were able to connect to the domain controller. Domain controller holds a list of everybody who signs into a computer for a business, right? We found one domain. We found 18 computers. We found 315 total users. We found the one DC domain controller, 51 security groups. Another computer got found there at the end, 0 trusts, and it was done in 4 seconds. So pretty quick. We've got some JSON files here, and all I'm going to do is take and upload them into this tool. Take just a second. And because this might be a little hard to see, I'll pull up a zoom option here. We need to dig in and zoom in a little bit. Okay, we got all those. So BloodHound is it's a database, and it loads in all that Active Directory information and then graphs it for you relationally. So it's got some built-in queries for that database. For example, find all domain admins. Okay, I've got a group here, domain admins at blackfield.local. I've got administrator at blackfield.local. So that's the only domain admin account. This is always a cool one to do, shortest path to domain admins. So it's going to map out on the domain any possible attack path that you might run into. And let's make this a little bit easier for everybody to read. And we'll zoom in a little bit here. So basically, we've got enterprise admin group, administrators at Blackfield group, and then domain admins at Blackfield group. And the only member, so the administrator account is only a member of the domain admins account, but that account in this relational graph shows that it has privileges over the other 2 enterprise and just regular old administrators groups. Switch that back off for a second. The interesting thing that you can do with this as well is you can go find the account that you originally attacked. So support at blackfield.local, and I can right click on them and I can say that we have, let's see, mark user as owned. We've got this account, now it's ours in the attack scenario. And you can go and look at all the Active Directory permissions and settings for that specific account, since we had full permissions to that account. And in this case, we're going to go down here and look at first degree object control. And if we look here, this user can reset a password for one other user on the domain. And it happens to be an audit account, an audit 2020 at blackfield.local.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, not good, not good. So we broke into probably a sysadmin's account, and he has access to change the account for an auditor or some other high-level person that might need access to, for example, that forensics folder we looked at the beginning. So we're going to use the tool to actually take advantage of that specific permission. It's called RPC client, just a command line version of doing this through the GUI, really, but do that right. All right, give me just a second.
Yep. The interesting thing about the hacking is it's a lot of trial and error, even in the moment. Which is...
Even whenever you practiced it 3 times this morning before you run our webinar. Okay. Need to give the server name at the end. There we go. And we just give that the same Black Knight password that we found originally for support. There we go. We've got access to Windows RPC for this user. We will use set user info audit 2020 23, and we're going to give them a password of hacked user 1 exclamation point. And we didn't get an error, so it looks like that might have been successful. An easy way to test that would be to use that same original file sharing service that we couldn't get access to that forensics folder, right? So we'll do in-packet SMB client. We're going to use the audit 2020 Blackwell.local account. It's asking us for a password, and we were able to authenticate. Still see the same shares, and let's see if we can use forensics. There we go, we've got access. So we just pivoted from having no user accounts to being able to access a privileged holder in about 32 minutes. So that'll conclude the hacking demo for today. Yeah, that is it.
And so now that you've got all this access, what would be the typical next steps for if you were an actual hacker getting into an actual business?
So from here, there's a memory analysis folder in here. So I could probably go in and see if there's any cached passwords in memory from whatever that was. Getting access to something like this means that somebody came in, they had to perform a forensic analysis on maybe a computer that was previously hacked, and I can find other weaknesses from there. I could also then use that same BloodHound tool with this audit account and see what other access it has on the domain. There's a lot of different attack paths here, but the thing with hacking is once you find one rock that shakes loose, typically you'll find a whole pile of gravel that shakes loose. So for example, we went down the rabbit hole of, oh, we've got a list of users. Let's try this quick attack first and see if it works before we try password spraying, which is probably the new modern hot cool type of attack to use in this scenario. But because we tried it and it did work, we got further than we did if we had just assumed we knew the right answer. It is a lot of trying. It's a lot of going back to your notes. It's a lot of going back and researching things online. The exam I'm taking is actually completely open book and open internet. So it's going to be mostly doing research online and then trying to see if I can use it to break past security measures. So.
Right. And then I think also, in terms of, I'm sure a lot of people on the webinar are thinking about ransomware and things like that. So now you've got access to all these files, so you can lock them out.
As soon as you had access to the file share, you could go in and start maybe saying like, oh, I'm going to say this is a Word document, and we'll send out an email to everybody in the company. Hey, download this Word document and open it. It's got a new form from HR everybody has to sign. We call that a watering hole attack. You're sending everybody to the same place to grab the same piece of malware to execute it. And all you need is one person with enough permissions to be able to get access to everything, right? So let's say, director of HR or, C-level exec goes in and clicks on that document, and they've got access to everybody in the company's accounts through Active Directory, or an IT person. I mean, IT people, we always try to be vigilant, but social awareness training is really the only way to prevent something like that from happening. You have to train to protect yourself. Like we said, it started with a phishing attack. It started with, just a user clicking a link, and we got access to some pretty minimal information, stuff that you wouldn't think. It was pretty benign if you were to say, oh, this is the data that got leaked. But because we already had access to the network, we could turn that around and weaponize it.
Yeah, and that brings us to, how could we have stopped this attacker? So Stephen, I'm going to let you get into that. You already mentioned the social awareness training, but let's get into some of the stop gaps that can kind of help prevent these sort of things.
Absolutely. So employee social awareness training is crucial in today's world. If you're not using a platform like Know4 or some other email phishing training program, it's really great. A lot of people feel bad when they click on one of those links, but they feel a lot better than they do if they clicked a real phishing link.
Yeah.
And sending them out on a regular basis to your employees, updated information is super easy to do through those platforms. You get to track analytics. It automatically assigns the users training to go through what they should be looking for. And it's just a really great program. It's the best way to make users more aware of what they're doing when they're using a computer. We so often mindlessly do things. If we're staring at a screen, it's so easy to zone out and just click a link. And something as simple as that on your work device can end it could end a business. So the other thing, strict password requirements. We saw a mildly complex password here, but the new modern standards, the new I think it's CIS, the security controls recommendation is to use a passphrase. So multiple words, definitely a mix of characters, nothing common that you would find in a book or a company motto or slogan or anything like that, but long passwords. The longer a password is, the longer it takes to brute force. Because this one was in a dictionary, it took me, I don't know, a few seconds. If this was a true brute force attack, I think my graphics card can do something like 200 million hashes a second or something like that.
Wow.
But that's one character cycling through if you're doing a true brute force attack. So the longer it is, that's exponentially longer that it takes to crack that password. And then also SOC as a service options or managed detection and response. If you're using something like Sophos Intercept X, if you're using a platform like Arctic Wolf, which are both those are both services that we offer, that we sell, and we can manage for people. You would see all of this stuff happening within minutes of the attack happening. So it took us, I don't know, 30, 40 minutes probably to get through all of that. If you had an alerting service, if you had people who were out there vigilantly looking and setting up all sorts of traps for these people on your network, setting up logging, setting up sensors, looking for people who are just throwing 50, 60 usernames at a domain controller trying to get a password hash back, that's something that should have been caught in this situation. If these people, if Blackfield was using any sort of internal detection system, I would have gotten shut down immediately. Obviously, this is a lab environment, and I knew that wasn't going to happen. But yeah, that would be the ideal practice.
Very good. Yeah, and I think somebody said, it goes to show that the weakest link is still the human element in terms of cyber defense, and I think that's definitely very true. I know when I first started in NetGain, I was one of those employees that accidentally clicked a fake phishing link, but better than a real one, and then I got some good training, and I feel pretty confident now in my ability to identify different potential phishing emails or texts, things like that. So it empowers your employees as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Alrighty, so I think that concludes basically our demo and discussion. So now let's go ahead and hop into Q&A. I am going to throw up just one poll, like I mentioned earlier, which is just how can NetGain help you? Are you wanting to discuss your cyber strategy, any other technology elements, things like that? So go ahead and answer that poll, and feel free to submit any and all questions you've got here. I'm going to start off with a couple. So, all right, let's see. So this person's asking, what are some other attack methods that could have happened to start this whole thing off? So, we had this example of John Doe clicking a phishing link, but how are some other ways that hackers get in, Stephen?
I mean, typically social engineering of some sort is a typical way. So we think about social engineering as being a person tricking a person, not necessarily somebody who wrote bad code forever ago and now that piece of software is running on your computer. and then the hacker finds that bad piece of code. Social engineering is the #1 way people gain access to systems that they're not supposed to gain access to. So you could call a business and pretend to be IT if you know enough about the company. So having an awareness of your online presence, making sure that your employees aren't sharing things like password information over social media. I know that sounds crazy, but there have been stories of people doing things like that over LinkedIn, for example. And if it's in a chat and somebody can get access to that person's LinkedIn account for whatever reason, they have a bad password, it's been leaked. Now they can see all the chat history between people working at that business. So those are methods. Also, I mean, poor password policy and having an externally facing service. So for example, if there was an Active Directory authenticated service, like maybe a VPN, if you use the same username and password to sign into your VPN, that's synced with Active Directory, and you're not using a strong password. We could be password spraying from behind the firewall, and if we get a VPN into the network, it just looks like a user working from home. And nowadays, that's a common thing. That would not set off any alarms until maybe we started doing all the pivoting inside the network.
Right. Oh, somebody's asking, could you just repeat the programs that you mentioned and what they are? So before Arctic Wolf, those kind of things.
Sophos Intercept X, Arctic Wolf. Arctic Wolf is I believe it's managed detection and response, but technically it's SOC as a service. You would get a CST, you get a concierge security team. So real people who are looking at this data, analyzing it, and can respond to it. And we actually do, through our essential securities package, offer management with that. So like we can be an intermediary if you don't have a technical person on staff that can talk to Arctic Wolf and actually remediate these issues. If you're already a client of ours, or if you're onboarded as a client of ours, we'll get all of that set up and we'll be able to go in and start working through that for you. Know before, and then I think that was it. I said password management was the other thing that could have stopped this. So just setting a strong password policy in Active Directory. And if you need help with that, we have lots of engineering staff here as well that would be happy to talk with you.
Yeah, awesome. Hopefully that helps. I know there's a lot of names, acronyms, everything in IT, so it's definitely
yes. Anybody needs
definitely important.
Let us know.
Yeah. Alrighty, let's grab a couple more. So what test are you taking, or program are you currently doing? I think they're talking about your OCSP certification.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that and what that is.
OSCP is the Offensive Security Certified Professionals exam. It's a test where you basically get a VPN access to a lab after you do this course. They have their own training, that goes along with this, but it's teaching all of the types of methods and more that I just presented. So it goes through, when you're doing the lab work in this course, there's a big environment set up with 50, 60, 70 virtual servers actually interacting with each other. There's simulated users in the environment, so you're learning to actually practice social engineering from the attacker standpoint. I don't actually have a degree. It's possible to get into this sort of thing without a degree, and I would recommend that if somebody were interested in this, they really research a university before they go. Nowadays, especially for ethical hacking, you can end up with a university who's teaching you really, really basic stuff, or teaching you to write extremely advanced malware, and they might be the same price, they might be in the same city. It's really hard to tell just through the marketing materials alone. So really research whenever you're if you're interested in doing something like that. But yeah, it's the Offensive Security Certified Professional, OSCP.
Nice. Okay, and somebody's asking, how would MFA have helped to prevent this attack that we demoed today?
Oh, MFA, I forgot to, I should have mentioned that. I think I mentioned that when we were going through this yesterday, or the other day. MFA definitely, if you have the option to enable MFA on a service, you should do it. Everybody, you get that notification when you log into social media or your Amazon account that says, hey, we'll send you a text message and it'll be more secure. Just do it. Because that's one more layer of security that an attacker would have to get around. It would have stopped me in my tracks from the get-go. I would not have been able to pretend to be any account. If I guess the guest account, if it was local only, and it definitely, they didn't set a password, they left the password blank, and it was the default guest account. I had that access. I could get the user list, but that's it. I would have gotten usernames, and there's other ways to get usernames too. So it wouldn't have, I would have not have gotten far at all. I would have been stopped dead early on.
Yeah, I think that's a great way, both personally and professionally, that you can help yourself stay
Yes.
secure for sure.
Yeah. A
Somebody
lot
else
of
is
times.
asking. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was going to just say a lot of times that there are options there to enable MFA even on like work-related software for free. So if you want to be more secure at work specifically and professionally, go check out those settings for your account. Just go do it, turn it on.
Absolutely. And NetGame's happy to help and discuss with your business how we can do that. I know we also,
Yes.
we like Google Authenticator and the Microsoft Authenticator within all of that is, those are two good ones I think that we use fairly typically. So we got another question here. So if an end user clicks on a phishing link, but doesn't take any additional action, is it a major risk to the organization? And what does this allow an attacker to get if they're just like, what does clicking on the phishing link actually give the hacker?
Gotcha. So let's say if we're going to play out a scenario here, I would say, well, let's play out the best case scenario, clicking on a phishing link. Best case scenario is you click on the phishing link and nothing happens. You get taken to a spam web page. Maybe there's a browser hijack that happens and you have to, force close your browser. Next time you open it up, it's fine. Or, you get a pop-up every now and then, but it's mostly just adware. That's best case scenario. Worst case scenario is you're signed into Office 365 when you click on that phishing link. You have a cached password in your browser. There's a script written that takes you to a whatever macro enabled document for Office 365 as a link. They take that cache password and then gain access to your email account, start spamming everybody inside your company with malware as a file that says, hey, I found this great free program. It's going to really help productivity. Will you check it out and tell me if it's helping you? If you want to get really devious with this, I would if I got one user to click a phishing link, I would be already trying to pretend to be IT, sending them, oh, maybe we can do a browser hijack. We get a browser hijack, we send them some adware, they're getting pop-ups, and I'll call and pretend to be IT. Hey, I'm IT. We noticed that you clicked on a phishing link. It looks like there might be some malware on your computer. Download this tool real quick and we'll connect it. Now you've got actual remote access to their machine and you're not just pivoting through the network over that. So if you stack attacks, if you multi-layer attacks, you can get just as far, if not farther, for sure. So
Right.
Complicated question. How bad is it to click a phishing link? It really depends on how big of a target you are and what other security layers you have in place. No one security approach is going to stop an attack. It used to be we thought, oh, you just need a firewall. You need to set your firewall rules. Now nobody can attack you. Well, when people started proxying TCP over HTTP, that's taking a normal service that would work on the LAN side and proxying it or running it over web services, which is something that is usually enabled by default for everybody. Now you have to change your game plan. If you don't know, you can definitely take all different types of command and control services and run it over what looks like normal web traffic. So a layered security approach is really the only thing that's going to stop attacks. And I won't say 100% of the time either. Most security professionals will tell you now it's not a matter of if, but when, and how prepared are you? And one of the things we offer as part of our essential security package is a risk assessment that you get. We go through policy with you. We go through disaster recovery plans. We talk about what happens when you get attacked. What are you going to do? So if that's something that your business is interested in, definitely get in contact with us.
Right. And it's, hope for the best, plan for the worst, I think is a
Absolutely.
good adage for cybersecurity.
Absolutely.
I think we've got one more question here, which I think is a good one, which is, so, you know, it took you between 30 and 40 minutes to kind of get through this whole thing. How long, if you weren't demonstrating for us, how long would it take a hacker to execute an attack like this? So give our audience, you know, like how would this affect them if this is exactly what happened in their business?
Well, so you guys are giving me the benefit of the doubt here a little bit. You're watching me do this. I've rehearsed it, but it's not what I do every day, all day. I definitely have other aspects to my job, and I'm trying to pay attention to a camera and remember to explain what I'm doing. An attacker has all the time in the world to practice, and they'll script this out. They'll write a program to automate some of the steps I just did and run it. You know, then they don't have to, the attack could happen in literally minutes, as opposed to, we're talking like 5 minutes, as opposed to 30 minutes. Maybe faster if you've got somebody who really knows how to do shortcuts. So think about that. What is 5 minutes? What could 5 minutes cost your business? It's kind of scary to think about, but I'm not trying to fear monger here. I definitely just want people to be aware. I'm not the most elite hacker out there. I'm a trainee at best. I'm still working on, you know, the entry level certification for what most people would consider a professional level career as a hacker. But there are people out there who would blow this out of the water in literally 5 minutes. Yeah.
All right, so it's one link, 5 minutes for the hacker, and it could unfortunately cost a business quite a
I
lot of
mean,
money. So
at least getting the forensic data. If an attacker, maybe for example, saw something I didn't see during all of this, during doing the reconnaissance part of this, they could have gotten the domain admin, like owned the entire network, 5 minutes.
right, and that can definitely be a problem, which is again why it's
Yeah,
important to have a plan for recovery as well.
absolutely.
So, alrighty, I think that's all the questions we have here. So I think we're gonna go ahead and wrap this up. But yeah, if you've got any questions about your security or any other technology elements of your business, definitely contact us using the information on the slide. And yeah, thank you so much, Stephen, for sharing your expertise and demonstrating for us today. We really appreciate it.
For sure.
And thank you so much to everybody in the audience for joining. If you all would like to just answer, there's going to be a survey that pops up right after I close out the webinar. We'd greatly appreciate any feedback that you all have. So just if you don't mind to fill that out once I end the webinar. But yeah, thanks again, Stephen. Thanks everyone for joining us, and have a great rest of your day.